This from Pro Football Focus, 2023 NFL Draft. Biggest questions for each and every one of the 32 teams in the NFL. For the Browns, their question is, can they make something out of nothing? If the Browns are going to have a successful draft, they'll need to get savvy. Doesn't have its own selection in the first 2 rounds, and they pick only twice in the top 100. And that's a valid question and a valid criticism.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of it is, obviously Deshaun Watson, was the first-round pick, and Elijah Moore dropped you from 42 to 74. But for this draft to be a real success and for there to be even instant impact, right, at whatever degree you want to say that, a guy that contributes in a rotation, a guy that happens to, work his way in the starting lineup, I think you need some luck, right? Because at 74, you need somebody to fall. It's not in your control, which is probably, I'm sure it's maddening at some degree for Andrew Berry that it's so out of his hands. Then I think the other part is you need to be creative in whether that's possibly trading up from 74 to, let's say, 60 because somebody's falling that you really like, or turning 74, 98, or one of those, 4th or 5th rounders into a player on another team, right? A team drafts a guy and then a veteran becomes available and you can get him for the cost of one draft pick. Like that, to me, could be another way the Browns could win a draft in which they don't have a whole lot of capital.
Yeah, and so they're going to pick twice in the 3rd round. So the natural thing is let's take a look at some of the guys that have been picked the last several years in the 3rd round. We're going to go back 2017, Alvin Kamara, Dwayne Smoot, Cooper Kupp, Pat Elflein, all NFL guys with solid careers. Chris Godwin was a 3rd-round pick. Kareem Hunt, we know about him. You go up another year, 2018. Michael Gallup was a 3rd-round pick, as was Orlando Brown. Same draft a little bit later. Mark Andrews, Arden Key, a guy that the Browns had some interest in free agency. 2019, Draymond Jones was a 3rd-round pick. Pratt, David Montgomery, Devin Singletary, pretty good running backs. Terry McLaurin, Chase Winovich, David Long, an undersized guy that you see there from Michigan as well. So, Scott, the Browns haven't had a lot of success in the 3rd round. Now, they did get Martin Emerson, who everybody liked a year ago. That's 3rd round is also where you had Elliott, who hasn't hit. You had Jordan Phillips, who hasn't been able to stay healthy. But there are guys every year in the 3rd round that end up being really good NFL players. We just took a look at a couple of them.
Yeah, I think that's worth remembering for sure. There's hits and misses on that list, right? Chase Winovich probably hasn't lived up to what the Patriots hoped he would be with the 3rd-round pick. He's no longer in Cleveland after a year. But then you get a guy like Kareem Hunt, and there's a reason he was around in the 3rd round. I mean, Mark Andrews, right, jumps off that list because how good he is. So, I think it's important to manage expectations. You don't expect, or you probably shouldn't expect as a fan, for whoever the Browns pick at 74 or 98 to come in and have a huge impact right away. Having said that, those picks are important, right? They're not throwaway picks. The Browns need to be better at hitting on those, whether it's a guy that just contributes some form or fashion early and then develop, right? Like 3rd rounders need, on a really good roster and a really deep team, those 3rd-round picks need to develop into starters. And that's what the Browns were hoping for with Jordan Elliott and Jacob Phillips, and it just hasn't worked out, right? Elliott got his chance last year and wasn't good enough. Phillips has never been able to stay healthy, like you mentioned. And even when he's played, I don't think he's made the impact, which could be attributable to the injuries, but he hasn't had the impact when he's been in there. So I think they know what they want to do from a development standpoint and bring these guys along, but it hasn't gotten to where they need it to be.
Yeah, and the other thing is, keep in mind, let's see if Jim Schwartz can identify, okay, we're not going to ask this guy to do this in our system. We're going to only ask him to, 3rd round, guys have traits, and Andrew Berry talked about it. There's traits that are elite, and then there's other things that they don't do well enough. So the key is finding a guy you can plug into your system that has traits you can play on.
Yeah, and I think it's going to be really interesting to see how much impact Jim Schwartz has on this draft, right? Whether or not anyone admits it. I know Andrew Berry talked about him and Bubba Ventrone really being helpful in the pre-draft meetings, right? And who they like and what they're looking for. But do they get a Schwartz guy or two, whether it's D tackle or D end, wherever it is? Do they get a guy that he says, hey, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is a player I want. It'll be interesting to see how Berry and his personnel staff handles that. But, when you say Schwartz in third round, you also got to bring up Anthony Schwartz, right? I mean, that's an example of one of those third-round picks that doesn't work or hasn't worked.
Yeah, I missed the pun there, but that's a really good one.